Hello everyone, welcome back, and I hope you found those workshops as interesting, insightful, and as helpful as I did. It's my pleasure to introduce the Voices for Justice speakers for this section. The Voices for Justice speakers are a group of people who are part of a newly formed environmental justice network that we are managing within the ERCS. It is a group of people who all have their own individual concerns in their communities and their areas that they have been fighting for years, some people for decades, and they've come together because they believe that there needs to be a collective push for environmental justice. And so they're going to speak about their stories, what they've done to fight for their environmental justice, and where they're at in those. And it really will give you an insight into what is really happening here in Scotland and what is needed to achieve environmental justice. So without further ado, I would like to introduce George Nyblock to start.
I hope you were clapping, Cornell, and not in expectation of how my presentation is going to be. Yeah, I'm George Nyblock. My campaign for clean streets affects every single one of you. Some of the campaigns today you'll hear about individual areas, but mine affects the whole of Scotland, if not the whole of UK. So I'm a retired public health professional with some 56 years of practical involvement in this area. And I've become increasingly offended by the lack of cleanliness of our streets and open public spaces in Scotland. Now, everyone here today must have observed it when you're travelling here today and have seen it in your ordinary lives, day-to-day lives. Or perhaps, like many people, have you become inured to it? Is it just normal? It's been like that now for years, so you don't spot it anymore? Keep Scotland Beautiful reported a few years ago that over 1 million people in Scotland live on filthy streets. They report that 80% of people are offended by litter and the cleanliness of the areas they live in, and that the problem is getting worse. We are facing the systemic failure by all duty bodies, and that includes Scottish ministers who are responsible for our motorways, to comply with the law. Now, the law says that they have to ensure that our roads and open public spaces are kept clean. It is a public health imperative. A study commissioned by Zero Waste Scotland highlighted that the mental and physical health aspects alone of unclean streets has an impact on the National Health Service equivalent to £53 million a year. That's only one aspect of it. There's far too many other aspects to cover in this short presentation. And I know you're seeing above me some photographs. That's a nice cycle track. Get out there and be fit and healthy and cycle in Glasgow and try and cycle in that cycle track. As a campaigner of that duration, I've got some background knowledge, and I've tried every remedy short of going to the Court of Session, which has been mentioned here today. On behalf of a local environmental group where I live up in Aberdeenshire, I took what is believed to be the only case against a council in Scotland to the civil courts for failure to clean a street. Our legal team had 6 visits to the court. The case cost around £40,000. We were fortunate to get a good part of that as pro bono by a legal firm. But the council put their team up and they claimed £15,000 expenses against us when the sheriff failed to issue us an order to get them to clean the streets. That was 5 years ago. A freedom of information request 10 days ago, they confirmed that they haven't swept that street in the past 10 years. So I don't know why we failed in our duty there. Now, in the end, we had to settle out of court for all the money that our group had acquired. We'd acquired £15,000 through fundraising, and the council took all of that, and the group were put out of business. It was the largest litter picking group in the United Kingdom at the time, with 650 litter picking volunteers who are disbanded. Well, that case had all its trials and tribulations, and many of the things you will hear in the workshops went on in that case. The evidence from it was part of the consideration of the the UN Aarhus Convention Compliance Committee that has led to the call for the Environmental Justice Court. Now, I've got some hope for the creation of the new Environmental Standards Scotland as a potential to hold public bodies to account. But the system is loaded against ordinary members of the public and ordinary individuals. So local authorities and other public bodies can disregard the law with complete impunity at the moment. And really, the courts are the only way to hold them to account. For me, clean streets are a litmus test for public sector compliance with environmental standards. And you know the standard of our clean streets. You've seen them there. Left-hand side there, as I'm looking at it, is a primary school in Glasgow. The middle one is the roundabout in the A96 outside the town I live in Inaugural. Those bits of wood, that picture was taken 5 years ago, and the bits of wood which fell off a lorry, kitchen units, are still there today. And the final one to the right-hand side, welcome to Scotland. That is outside Edinburgh Airport, with all the cigarette ends just dumped in the grass. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. Next, we have Ishbel Shan.
I'm Ishbel Shand, and I'm here speaking. Oh, I'm not as tall as George. Thank you. I'm Ishbel Shand, and I'm here representing the Friends of St Fittick's Park in Torry. The Torry area of Aberdeen was historically an independent township surrounded by farms and hills. The local industries were shipbuilding and repair, fishing, and working in fish processing. 50 years ago, the oil and gas industry arrived. Old Torry Fishing Village was destroyed to make way for the Shell base. Large industrial estates and landfill sites were built on Torry's boundaries. Torry already hosts a sewage treatment works serving 250,000 people. A smelly and noisy 150,000 tonne per annum incinerator serving Aberdeen, Aberdeenshire and Moray was constructed 400 metres from the primary school in people's homes. Bay of Nig was sacrificed to create a massive deep water harbour. Torry has 0.2% of the Scottish population and 4.6% of the control of major accident hazard sites. Folk in and outside Torry have fought against all of these developments, but they've gone ahead anyway. Now, St Fittick's Community Park, home to award-winning biodiverse rich wetlands, and the ancient St Fittick's Kirk has been rezoned for industry. It's the last remaining accessible green space for Torry's 10,000 residents, many of whom have no private gardens. It's a play park for the children of Torry. Developer obligations for environmental improvements and outdoor classrooms in the park were imposed on the Port of Aberdeen when the harbour was built. The council didn't enforce these, instead becoming a partner with the oil billionaire Sir Ian Wood's Opportunity North East Company, the Port of Aberdeen and Scottish Enterprise in a business plan to rezone the park for industrial use. This plan got 53 million in funding from the Scottish and UK governments, 2 years before the Scottish Government reporter granted permission for the park to be rezoned. The threat to the park is portrayed as a response to the climate crisis. Development is described as essential for an energy transition zone, an ETZ. The Aberdeen Harbour 2020 document tells a different story. The original city centre harbour is to become upmarket apartments and a marina, and port-centric industry removed to Torry. This is a land grab, a property development exercise. The business plan shows all the green belts surrounding Torry as ETZ sites. The master plan for the area says 3 greenfield sites, including the park, will be developed in years 0 to 3. Council documents say enabling works will begin in the first quarter of 2024. The council and its business partners admit they don't know what, if any, interest there is in the park. This is speculative development using public money. There was no effective consultation before the initial rezoning with either the statutory consultees, the public, or opposition councillors. Folk in Torry have a life expectancy of 13 years less than the wealthier parts of Aberdeen and 20 years less of healthy life expectancy. The area surrounding the park is in the bottom 10% of the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation. An open letter signed by 22 health practitioners spells out the effect losing the park will have on the health and well-being of the community. There's been no health impact assessment on the cumulative effects of this concentration of polluting industries on residents. No monitoring of the air, noise, and odour pollution that they have to contend with. Development in the park runs counter to the stated aims of both the Scottish Government and the local authority on a large number of issues, including biodiversity and health inequalities. Currently, powerful local vested interests can treat this community as if it was disposable with impunity. The victims pay. There is no legal redress for the environmental and social injuries inflicted on them. There is an urgent need for mandatory and enforceable policies to protect the public. ERCS have given us legal advice and support throughout the 3 years plus of the campaign, and their assistance is going to be of even greater importance now that the planning process has begun. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishmael. And now we have Jim Jarvie.
Which is the forward? Forward. Okay. Quick show of hands. How many of you here have been down to the shore in Leith? Great. I'm going to give you the alternative tour. So I'm Jim Jarvie from SOS Leith, Save Our Shore Leith. I'm here with a few of my colleagues. And this is the shore, the number 1 and 2 area. To start, give the background. Forth Ports, the water in Leith used to be tidal with a 20-25 foot up and down of the tide twice a day. Where the Forth Loch is, that's when Forth Ports in the 1960s put up a tidal gate to keep the water level for the ships. That turned basically our neighbourhood, the basins, the areas between the bridges 1, 2, and 3, and 4, into a slow-moving canal. Basin 1 up was also privatised and sold off to a private sector company. That's the background, which is really important to understand what's coming up next. This is how the shore is seen, kind of really vibrant, cool, edgy neighbourhood. It's got the bars, it's got the restaurant, it's got the train spotting vibe, and then you move on. For those of us who are living there, it's a bit different. We started off about 4 or 5 years ago now, when a storm brought this wood down to the edge between the private sector group and Forth Ports. And we said to the council after a few days, kind of, excuse us, can you sort this out? No. We can't touch the water. That belongs to the private sector. We contacted the private sector company. They said, no. This is council litter, and it's blocked by the barrier, the boom, going into Forth Ports. We talked to Forth Ports, and they said, not our land, mate. We're really, really sorry. So we had the buck being passed between all 3 groups. We got a bit fed up. We got a big picture of our MSP, said, Ben McPherson, please help us. Stuck it on the bridge in Leith, and then started our campaign. We reignited an agreement to clear this sort of stuff up between the private sector, Forth Ports, and the council. So we won that, but then we thought, we really identified some structural problems around the tenure, the rights and responsibilities to our neighbourhood where we're living. The second issue we wanted to look at, and this had no success over many years, was silt. This is Sandport Bridge, which is very close to the end of the river. 1910, the tide's not completely low. It's about 25 foot deep. Mid-tide, kids used to jump off into the water. Same place, I took a picture up there. This is it now. For 60 years, that silt has been building up, up, and up. So the river is about that deep in many places, sometimes left, sometimes, of course, exposed. And beneath that, we've got 20 foot of silt. We tried to work with the various groups on that without any success. Then we came across ERCS, or ERCS as we're calling it, and asked ERCS to help us because we found out about the 65 sewage discharges coming down the water of Leith. Among those 65, 24 are high priority for engineering, and among those 25, 8 are right where we are. So we've done the rounds of FOIs between SEPA, Scottish Water, and Scottish Government, being told, don't worry about it, 65% of Scotland's water is really good, which means if I had a brain injury, hey, my body's fine, there's nothing to worry about. This is Scotland's one of the most deprived and one of the poorest and most densely populated areas in the country. We're having real difficulty getting specifics taken care of, and ERCS has been instrumental in helping us get through to politicians, escalate our concerns up to higher levels of government. And just to end up, here's where we are now, and think about this next time you're down in the shore. Here's a panorama. So basically the bridge, Victoria Bridge at the end there, past that is Forth Ports, which caused the complete change of ecology and tenure in our neighbourhood. The water you see there used to be 25 foot deep. It's now centimetres deep with a lot of silt. And over 60 years, sewage has been building up in there. We cannot get an answer from Scottish Water, for example, or SEPA, about what are the fecal coliforms in there. They're going, well, we don't test for that. We test basically for agricultural runoff. This is now becoming a public health issue. We've just met with Scottish Water. In their report, they say that dealing with our CSOs is on target. You drill down, that means, well, we're thinking about it. We might do something. We'll still need to find a budget. We'll still need to get planning permission to dig up the roads and fix the CSOs. So we are left not knowing how much sewage is in the water. We want to find that out. We want to find out how often it's being released, how much. And from Scottish Government, we want a clear answer. What risk are we being put at? How much are we going to be putting up with it into the future? And when will this be fixed? And again, a big thank you to ERCS for the support in moving this forward. It's a slow battle. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Now we have Kathleen Eady.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Kathleen Eady. I'm with River Amend Action Group. Our work is centred around a popular and valued local river, the River Amend, which runs through Edinburgh, West Lothian and North Lanarkshire. And it's widely used recreationally for fishing, swimming, dog walking, foraging, all that kind of thing. But the reality is that millions of tonnes of untreated sewage is dumped in the River Amend every year, and either due to extraordinary weather events or just in failures with our sewage treatment system. There are 7 wastewater treatment works along the length of the River Amend, and there's 87 combined sewage outflows. So this is pollution being discharged into the water throughout the whole water course across 3 regions. In addition, West Lothian especially is one of the fastest growing regions in Scotland. There's significant building work going on, which we need for housing, but this is putting really phenomenal pressure onto our water system, and it will continue to do so over the next decade or so. So in reality, tons of sewage-related debris is being flushed into the Amend, onto Crammond Beach, into the Forth, and then onto the sea. And we'd like to stop this from happening. So a group of local concerned residents formed the River Amend Action Group 2 or 3 years ago. So after some initial dating and evidence collection on the sewage, or the levels of sewage discharge that were being sent into the Amend, ERCS supported us with several Freedom of Information requests, somewhat unsatisfactory requests, and continue to support us in escalating through the complaints process of SEPA and then through Environmental Standards Scotland. Because we really felt the local community was being let down by failures by holders of these CSO licences, and we suspected that these were unlawful pollution events happening on our doorstep. In addition, we also supported another group, Forth Rivers Trust, in an application for the Amond to be the first river in Scotland to be awarded the bathing waters designation, along with the additional monitoring protection that that designation would afford us. Unfortunately, that application also failed, supposedly because we were unable to demonstrate the requirement that 150 bathers needed to be recorded using the River Amond at one site at one time. We felt that this was quite an unrealistic threshold to meet. It's not echoed elsewhere in the UK. So ERCS have made representations on our behalf to the Scottish Government to challenge that particular threshold, to make bathing water designations in the future a little bit more straightforward and attainable for communities. More locally, we also sit on the West Lothian Water Quality Working Group, alongside our MSP, MP, local council, representatives of SEPA, Scottish Water, wastewater treatment companies, and other civil society groups in our area. And we really find this and hope that this will continue to be a useful channel for us to raise our concerns direct from the community, but also to find solutions without going through any formal mechanisms. So it's a channel that we really value. We have also had the opportunity to meet with Mary McCallum, which was great. We, in addition, run several local events to ensure that we are using and valuing our river. So it's clean-up events, we take part in protests, and we have engaged with citizen science as well. And finally, we are in the process of setting up a climate hub with other local community groups. So for us, justice looks like three kind of broad areas. Firstly, that there is a firm commitment and a concrete commitment from the Scottish Government to end sewage pollution altogether and to take steps to do that. We also would like to see mechanisms for effective accountability, specifically that SEPA are discharging their statutory duties in full, and more generally that there's better transparency and engagement in this age of open data. That should be quite achievable. We also fully support ERCS in calls for additional policies, regulations, and enshrinement of our environmental rights at the Scottish Government levels, and really most importantly, access to programmes to navigate these for communities so that we can effectively take part in the protection of our local spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Kath. Hello? Does this work? There we go. Thank you, Kathleen, for that. And just to round it off, if you have not heard enough of the stories that are occurring around Scotland, we have Jo Hurst.
Hello. I'd like to talk to you today about the dangers of sewage sludge spreading on agricultural land in Scotland and the impact that that has. So my name is Jo Hurst, and together with my colleague, Doreen Goldie, I've been campaigning against the spreading of sewage sludge on agricultural land for the past 14 years. We've been highlighting in particular the risks to human health and animal health, risks to the wider environment and the long-term implications. Research shows that sewage sludge is not a safe material for use as an agricultural fertiliser. It contains a mix of waste, including residue from human faeces, industrial effluent, laboratory, hospital, funeral and dental waste, veterinary waste and pharmaceutical residue, including contraceptives, endocrine disruptors and amphetamines, etc., and the list goes on. This toxic mass presents dangers which fall into three main categories. Number one, hormone and synthetic hormone contamination. Number two, prion contamination. And thirdly, toxin contamination. In 2012, scientists at the University of Aberdeen studying sheep maintained on pastures that were fertilised with sewage sludge found a high incidence of fetal abnormalities. These were attributed to the presence of man-made hormones, particularly those found in the contraceptive pill. They found exposure to chemicals affected the structure or the function of testes, ovaries, uteri, parts of the brain, and thyroid and adrenal glands of sheep fetuses. In adult sheep, changes in bone structure, the testes, and offspring behaviour were observed. Dr. Rind and Professor Fowler stated, these chemicals may be associated with disruptions of many different physiological systems and increased incidences of disease and reproductive deficiencies in the varieties of species, including humans. It's notable that incidences of breast and testicular cancer and of fertility problems in humans are increasing, while populations of animal groups as diverse as amphibians and honeybees are in decline. They told the festival the effects on ecosystems and human health could be as significant as climate change. These findings were supported by research done by Dr. Michelle Bellingham of the University of Glasgow in 2014, which found low sperm counts in the testes of 42% of the animals grazing on agricultural land treated with sewage sludge tested. And there have been significantly more studies done that have established the same thing since. So what is prion contamination? Prions are virtually indestructible rogue proteins that cause incurable brain infections such as mad cow disease or Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is known as CJD. They are difficult to inactivate, they resist extreme heat, chemical disinfectants and irradiation. Toxin contaminations consist of 27 heavy metals found in sewage sludge. None of the toxic organic chemicals it contains are regulated or even monitored, and many are accumulative. So, what are our actions been to date? We have worked tirelessly to hold public bodies to account. We have highlighted concerns with local authorities, with environmental health departments, with MSPs, with MPs, with SEPA, with Scottish Water, with the Scottish Government, and even with the United Nations. After raising a parliamentary petition in 2014, the Scottish Government finally agreed to review the sewage sludge use, but the process has been agonisingly slow and without any tangible results. In 2016, the Scottish Government published the review of the storage and spreading of sewage sludge on land in Scotland. This was known as the Sludge Review. 21 key recommendations were made as a result of that review, none of which have been implemented. In 2018, in response to our continued campaigning and complaints, the Scottish Government commissioned the James Hutton Institute from Aberdeen University to produce an updated health risk assessment of sewage sludge, including a public consultation in which we participated. The final report was in 5 parts. The report was not made public. In June 2021, we contacted the ERCS for legal advice. They assisted Doreen to make a Freedom of Information request on the 1st of July 21 to gain access to the final report. This request was refused on the basis that the government intended to publish the report within 12 weeks of her request. 12 weeks passed, the report wasn't published. ERCS then assisted us with appealing the failure to publish the report. It was eventually disclosed on the 17th of October 2021. However, there were glaring differences between the draft that had been supplied to us than the original one that was produced by the government. Once the report was made public online, we felt that it didn't fully address public concerns regarding regulatory and enforcement failures, and we commented in writing on this. The report made a number of recommendations to mitigate risks to human health, including odours, but to date, none of these have been implemented. The ERCS then contacted MSPs to ask parliamentary questions on our behalf on both reports, including when the recommendation actioned would be implemented. So, what's our current position? Well, following a letter to the Minister for the Environment and Land Reform, the ERCS was informed that a consultation paper on the recommendations from the 2016 sludge review would be published by October 2022. This was subsequently delayed until January 2023. It has now been delayed further to October 2023. Given this delay, in November 2022, on our behalf, the ERCS submitted a representation to the Environmental Standards for Scotland regarding the failure to implement the recommendations of the sludge review from 2016. This was rejected. So, our asks of the Scottish Government have remained the same throughout: to assess the full environmental contamination risks and impacts on both human and animal health relative to the spreading of sewage sludge on agricultural land. Secondly, to update the regulations and guidance and enshrine them in legislation so they can be enforced. And thirdly, to ensure proper monitoring and enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And just to round up, I would like to invite Jim Jarvie to say a couple of words on behalf of the speakers and the rest of the Environmental Justice Network.
Thank you. Cornell asked me to wrap up, and I wasn't quite sure what to say, but I've got three reflections from the talks today and the network that ERCS has set up between us. We've heard about litter, sewage in water, sewage in silt, sewage on land, land grabs. And I've got three big reflections. The first is that every one of our projects is valuable on its own, but addressing just one is a sticking plaster. It doesn't go very far. It's a symptom of something much broader. Which is my second reflection, which is what we're talking about all the way through here is a complete failure in governance. And certainly I would be tempted to go further. It's as though the public institutions like SEPA, Scottish Water and others are protecting the government from us. And we need a far more systematic way of addressing the environmental risks in Scotland. If we take a body like SEPA, and certainly our experiences in the rivers, they're monitoring agricultural runoff. And what we're hearing from every talk today is that the environmental risk to the green environment, to ecosystem services, to biodiversity, is almost now being subsumed by the public health risk. And the public health risk is something that the environmental agencies, A, are not addressing, and B, they don't link into the public health agencies themselves. So we need joined up thinking across a whole legislative front to really make things better. But the powers against us, whether it's developers, predefined government agendas, the unwillingness to spend in upgrading, say, sewage infrastructure, those are great challenges in terms of very, very big challenges, which none of us individually can take on. So I want to thank ERCS for bringing us together, for providing a platform to do this. And I would say for every single person in this room, we need to be working together and having a collective voice. Because certainly I think from all of our experiences, all of us have been campaigning for years. We've lost a lot. We've spent a lot of time, and on our own, we're not getting very far. And the only solution is going to be getting joined-up thinking in government and joined-up thinking among ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And I want to thank again the speakers. If you are interested in joining to the Environmental Justice Network, these are only 5 of a few more people, and this is a it's in the very early stages of this network. So if you are interested, if you have share the passion, you want to push the environmental justice agenda forward, please come and speak to me today. I would be very interested to talk to you and listen to you. Thank you again to our speakers, and thank you for listening.
I've got nothing else to say. Lunch will be served and we'll come back at 1 o'clock. Thank you.